All right, it has been a hot minute since I've done a video, but I came to a realization I wanted to share it. I'm hopefully going to be able to do this pretty quickly here. I'm at work on a break, and so one of the things I've wrestled with as it comes to the church online is the lack of definition for the move to online as if it were a space, and the kind of distancing that technology gives the church. That's kind of a rough approximate of a very broad and kind of awkward topic that we have to talk about as we discuss the online church from a theological perspective. But really, it boils down to like what we're doing with technology and whether or not that's something that can be done, should be done. All those different issues, and without previous exposure to something similar, because no one seemed to write anything about church's use of technological means back when radio was introduced or television was introduced. Really, it's just the internet, and I think that's just because it scales that now we're seeing it happen so quickly that there's this latency in our response. There's this we're already into the pool. We've jumped both feet, and now we need to figure out whether or not we can swim. That kind of thing. And so I've been trying to figure out a way how to rationalize this, how to think about, what is the online church actually doing that's different than what, churches have done for, centuries. What is the real difference that online church, online worship shows us where it's not? And I've felt for a long time that, like a lot of people, that it's just not real church because we have this online element. That real church for centuries has happened just in person. That, we use technology to amplify a voice from a stage, but everyone was in front of that stage. And the technology was helping an in-person thing happen, not being a dividing feature between the two. And what I would have come to realize is that we treat the online church and doing church online, we treat it the same way a drone pilot treats flying. And really, all the moving parts are the same there. What we have when you have online churches who have a congregation that meets, or even just a pastor that produces a piece of content for his church to consume through the internet. He has a camera, he's making content, and then there's a screen on the other end of whatever network you have, whether it's wireless, whether it's not, where the congregation is consuming that content and interacting with it. And the same puzzle pieces exist when you watch stunt drones perform. And everyone's probably seen one of these videos where someone's flying a drone, they have a headset on, and they're flying a drone through obstacles, through the forest, through abandoned buildings, and it's wicked because you never have access to these spaces before. They're doing things that would never possible simply by walking around or even being in the spaces like they were before. And in the case of a lot of the stunt drones, they're doing stuff for a fraction of the cost that traditional helicopter footage would take to be able to do. That's what these stunt drones and video drones, where you're wearing the headset and you're seeing what the drone is seeing. But are you flying when you're piloting one of those drones? You're definitely in control. You're definitely seeing what it's like to fly through those spaces. But are you flying? And that's where I think this whole analogy of online church really does fall apart, because like the drone pilot, which is sitting firmly on the ground, in fact has to immobilize himself because his visual senses are being so inundated by the high definition feed of the drone that's being piloted, in ways that his body couldn't do, in ways that he couldn't fly, or he couldn't turn, or he couldn't spin, or he couldn't descend and float and glide. The drone pilot isn't doing any of those things, but the drone is. And what we're saying online church is the same thing that happens when that person is in the room, but they're not in the room. In fact, they're separated from the room in a way that's meaningful, in a way that separates them from the gathered people of Christ. This is something that's not dealt with in the Bible, and that's a valid criticism for people who are anti-online church. Like, yeah, it doesn't talk about it in the Bible, so we can't make rules about it in the Bible. It's like, yeah, but it also talks about, the Bible also talks about having your yes mean yes and your no mean no, and your no mean no. And what we're doing with online church is we're deciding what certain things mean when they're demonstrably other things. We're deciding that we can gather online. And I don't think we can gather online, because gathering is something that has to happen in person, the same way flying is something that has to happen in the air. The drone's flying, and there is an online, okay, but the drone pilot is not flying. They're not off the ground. They're not the ones spinning. They're not the ones turning. They're not the ones floating. They're not the ones hovering. They're on the ground. They might be in control, but they're not flying. The drone is. And when it comes to online church, I really do think that what Christians are doing is very similar to what the drone pilot's doing. They're participating in something that's church-like, that does the things that church does, but are in fact not going to church. When it comes to church, that's not just an idle thing to say, that they are participating in the things that are not worship while claiming it is worship, the same way a drone pilot claims to be flying but is not flying. The drone's flying. The internet church is happening, but the pilot, the worshiper at home, actually isn't doing what is being said to happen online. And the more and more you compare and contrast those things, they have all the same moving parts. Yet we would never say that the drone pilot who's sitting in a chair with a headset on is flying, but we would say to someone who's sitting in a chair with a headset on attending a virtual church that they're going to church. Why? We're deciding this right and wrong. We're deciding these definitions that are clear as day the second you remove them out of a context that requires us to make them that way in order for them to function the way we want them to. And I really do think this is dangerous, because it gives license to require us to allow a lot of things in order that we might just be okay with it as a church. This is one of the big dangers of doing online church, is because at a philosophical level, if it isn't actually church, then what we're doing is not righteous, it's not devout, it's not worthy, it's not worship. So just food for thought. I want you to go out and I want you to look at one of these stunt videos, and I want you to pay attention to when the drone passes by the person who's flying it, and ask yourself, is that person that the drone sees as it's flying past the person that is piloting that drone, when you have that kind of weird connection of multiple perspectives, is that person who's flying that drone, when the drone flies past it, flying past themselves? Then how is the church gathering online? And how are they worshiping? Talk to you later.